Welcome, everybody. My name is Clint Lentner, and I'm here with my coworker and co-presenter, Mike Pagan. Both of us are solutions architects at Network Center. And today we're going to be going through just some high-level items within the Office 365 environment, kind of showing you a lot of the neat features that we see through 365. And going to take, if those of you who read our previous presentation, this one will be a little slower, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some good Q&A. Jumping right in, talk through our agenda. So we've got some Microsoft 365 administration items we'll be going through. Even if you've never used Office 365, Microsoft has designed their product so a moderately technical or even entry-level technical person can help manage the environment. A lot of times where we see this, even though we're helping them with all the heavy backlifting of a migration, et cetera, we still recommend that clients have somebody who is willing to log into the admin portal and just handle some basic day-to-day, or at least understand some basic day-to-day operations that are available there. Things like a password reset or declining or disabling somebody's user account. It will go through those things. And then each one of the main features of Office 365 has its own administrative center, and we'll be walking through those for Exchange Online, Teams, etc. Talking a little bit about pricing, and then asking the question at the end, is the Microsoft 365 product a good fit for me? I would say, at least starting off, most of our clients, it has been, but there are some situations where it may not yet be a good solution for you. A couple things just to note about the environment that we'll be talking about. So the majority of this presentation is a demo. So we'll be spending most of it here on a virtual machine with some virtual users. It is a purely Microsoft 365, meaning there is no on-premise Active Directory environment. There's no hybrid Exchange server. This is a demo environment that's been pre-populated by Microsoft. So all the information that you see there is just designed to give you the illusion of a real company. And then also we'll be demoing a lot of products that are business premium. So Microsoft has a number of different tiers available. Obviously the email and stuff like that is kind of the basic. Some of you may just have like an E1 or an F3 license, I believe, where you just have a mailbox. But as you go up in licensing, they open up a lot of other additional features. So let's go ahead and jump in. We'll just get started. So what we're going to first start on is just kind of, I'll show you around the Microsoft 365 administration portal. So we're going to break out of our presentation here. Here's my virtual machine that I've got up and running. And if we open up a web browser and browse out to admin.microsoft.com, we'll log in with our admin account, which I've already done here. And here's what we're seeing. So the first thing that I like to walk people through is on the left-hand side, you see the users and our active users. Here's our list of active users. Again, these are all pre-populated, and you can select a user and gather more information about that user. So here we've got Adele Vance, and if I wanted to add some additional information, possibly contact info, it's all right here in the web GUI. So very, very straightforward. Again, you don't have to be technical. Microsoft doesn't necessarily need you to be a technician to help manage this thing. Also, we have some other options here that are available. We can reset a password. We can block a sign-in, which that's an interesting feature we'll touch on in just a moment. You can choose to delete a user. You can update photos, etc. You can see what groups each user account is a part of. I'm going to go ahead and choose Alex Wilbur. So let's say that we wanted to reset Alex's password. Simply all we do there is click Reset Password. We can either choose to auto-generate a password or let me choose a password. And for this demo, we're going to automatically choose a password. Okay, and then I can choose whether or not I want this user to change their password when they first log in. In this instance, I don't. Just want him to go ahead and reset password, And there we go. There's the password that I had set. If I click show, it'll show the password that I created. And I can also have it email me with a list of those passwords. If for whatever reason, maybe you have a list or a number of test users that you're working with, you can select multiple users and you can have each, or you can reset the password for each of them. Again, you can either choose to auto-generate the password or let me create a password. In this instance, we'll do an auto-generate and require users to change their passwords the first time they log in. So now I've selected 3 of them here. And it'll take a little bit of time, and there we go. Passwords have been reset successfully. Here are all the passwords or the new passwords for each user. I click this checkbox. Here's my admin account. I can set it to whomever you want to receive that email. You'll receive an email with this content in it, which you can then use to distribute securely to your end users. Go ahead and uncheck that and choose close. Next up, we'll pick on Alex again. So there's a feature here called block sign-in. So this works a little bit different than what you may be used to for disabling a user account. So with your on-premise Active Directory environment, if you disable a user account, there's a lot of different mechanisms that are going on in the background that allow that user to authenticate to your environment, to the resources. When you disable that account, it doesn't automatically kick them out of the environment. So if they're actively in your environment, you would have to have an alternate method of getting them to log out. Now, once they log out, they can't log back in. Microsoft's solution to this here is the block sign-in feature. We've got Alex here, and basically all I do is I check this box, block this user from signing in, click Save Changes, and we'll get a little warning box that tells us once it finishes its save, here we go. Alex is currently blocked from signing in, so it achieves the same goal as if you would disable it from an on-premise account. However, in addition, they'll automatically be signed out of all Microsoft services within 60 minutes. So that's really neat. If he's logged in to his email on his phone, logged into Outlook, logged in anywhere that he's using a Office 365 account, this essentially kicks them out, and all the end user will see is that they have to log back in again, which they can't because they're currently blocked. So this is a handy security feature. And as I mentioned, there's some roles where I recommend that end users, or rather a power user, even if you're using us to manage your 365 environment, if you have a user who you suspect, maybe they got a laptop or a phone stolen, so their account could be vulnerable, yes, call us immediately. However, it's going to be fastest if you already are familiar with this. What I would recommend, block their sign-in and then call us immediately or immediately afterwards, because this is the first thing that we're going to do, but you can shorten that amount of time, and you're shortening that risk window by being able to comfortably do this yourself. So let's say then we, found Alex's phone or whatever, and you can see his sign-in is blocked. Simply all we do is check the unblock sign-in, and away we go. A little warning here: it may take up to 15 minutes for this user to sign in again. That is one thing that can take a little bit of time to get used to. Making changes on your on-premise environment, if you're familiar with that, like if you have an Exchange server and local Active Directory and those things, they're typically pretty immediate. So as soon as you do it, you call the user and boom, it's ready to go. In the Microsoft 365 world, things take time to replicate and talk to all the different servers in the background. The Microsoft Exchange Online server needs to talk to Azure AD, needs to talk to, SharePoint elements, all of those things. So typically, if you've made a change and it's not working right away, you got to wait it out a little bit. Next thing I wanted to talk about is group membership. So we looked at the user, and we've got a good understanding now of just some basic password resets. But here on the side, Microsoft also gives us a method of managing our groups, and there's a number of different types of groups. Again, if you've managed your on-premise environment, you may be familiar with a number of these. You have your security group, a Microsoft 365 group, which is new to Microsoft 65, and then we have our distribution list. So if we were to go ahead and create a new group, we get different choices here. So we'll start from the bottom here. Security, so controls access to resources as a typical security group would be. You have a mail-enabled security, so basically it has all the same features of security, but you're able to attach a email account to it. The most common that we see is a distribution list. Normally, when people are creating a group, they just want, oh, I want additional people to be able to email this one group, and away we go. So we'll click distribution, we'll click next. We'll call this demo 02. You can enter a description for your new group. Again, Microsoft tries to make this very easy. Our group address, demo 02, or maybe it's construction committee, whatever we want to call that. If you have multiple domains attached to your 365 tenant, you could select which email domain you want it to have. And then maybe you want this email account to be accessible from the outside. And simply all we do is check this box to allow people from outside my organization to send email to this distribution group. Go ahead and click next. And here's our review. We'll click next again, or rather click create group, and away it goes. I could choose certainly to add another group, or this here will give you a little warning that says it could take up to an hour for the group to appear in your active groups list. If you don't see your group yet, go to the Exchange Admin Center, which we'll be making our way over there shortly. All right, so we talked about groups, and the next piece I wanted to touch on is our licenses. So a big part of managing an a Microsoft 365 environment is managing the licenses. So you can see here through my groups, I've got a lot of users. Actually, we'll go to the active users. I've got a lot of users, but some of these are showing up as unlicensed, and maybe all I'm interested in is seeing my users who have a specific group. You can use the filter feature here. Or I can type in, if I want to look at all my conference rooms, just start off with conf. Or if I have, there are some built-in filters. So maybe all I want are all unlicensed users, any users that have sign-in blocks in the example that we used previously. Now I can see all of them. In this case, I just want to see all my licensed users, and there they are. You may have some other requirements. I was working with a client one time where they were importing a bunch of clients from a different state. And so it made it very easy to create a filter. We just created a new filter, and Wisconsin, there we go. And it just happened to be right here, Minnesota by default. And the state for each of the users that was set up was set to WI. I hit add, and we have one of them. We have Alan here, which I didn't know he was from Wisconsin, and now we do. So again, you can create your own filters, and makes it easier to manage those. The other thing too, if we go into billing, there's a couple options to see, because this is a good way to filter my user accounts, but maybe I want to filter by product. I can choose so under billing, choose your products, and it'll give me a list of all of my subscriptions. So here I can see, I've got 25 licenses of Business Premium, and I have one available. So I can choose Assign Users. Here's my list. And here are all the licenses that are currently being consumed of that subscription. And if I want to assign a license, this is one way to do it. You just type in their email address, and away we go. Adele, which she already has one, we would click assign. It'll give me a little, it'll say that she had a pre-existing license. And another way to do that, so if you have a lot of users, that's typically a better method of doing that, but you can do it just through the main users contact screen here. But if you have a lot of them, I don't recommend doing it this way. So we would click over to licenses and apps, and then you can check which license they should have, hit save. But as you can see, for the demo that I'm giving you, this is real time. This is about how fast these windows would pop up. If you had 100 of these that you needed to do, it would take a lot of time to click, 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 click. So if you're looking to make a number of license changes, I recommend going in under billing. So there's the your products, which we saw, or under licenses. and it brings us right to this screen here. Which this is also a screen if you have multiple licenses available. It just gives you a nice kind of dashboard of here's all the licenses that we've purchased, and here's all the licenses that are consumed. One of the things that I like to keep the available license count as low as possible. As soon as you have these available, you are being charged for them. So in this case, in this demo, they have one business premium license that's just hanging out there. Business premium runs $20 a month per user, so it's free money that's just hanging out there that nobody's using. Okay, last thing, kind of as an administrator that I wanted to show you, or at least general administration. We talked mostly inside of the admin center, but let's take a look at what it looks like for a regular user. So here I'm logged in as Adele, and your end users are able to browse to portal.office.com. Oh, no, we got the dark screen. I'm guessing Mike had logged in previously and changed it to dark screen. Or Adele maybe just decided on her own that she wanted the dark screen menu. So from this portal, you're going to have or your end users. So this is the web-based version of all of the Office tools. And depending on the license that you've assigned, they may only have these tools. It'll give you a list of all the applications that you've worked on previously. So here we have a PowerPoint presentation. So this is PowerPoint Online. It works very similarly to the full version. They try to make this as full-featured as possible. We can go through each of these. The one thing that I'll point out also is the install option or install Office option. So depending on what license you get, Microsoft does provide a option for users and admins to download a copy of the full Office suite. So with Business Premium, you're able to download and install that on up to 5 devices. Now going back to our admin screen, and we'll go back to Adele. I don't think Adele. Oh, actually, we'll go to Megan because I know Megan has at least one license that she's used. And this is something that we've seen occasionally where a user will be hopping around the office and they're, let's just say they have 5 different workstations that they work on, and they go into the 6th one and they get an error message that says you've exceeded your limit of Office activations. So we go into Megan's account here, and down at the bottom we have View Office activations, and we can see that, well, I know she's at least signed in once because we're signed in here, but she'll have one entry for each workstation that she has logged in and licensed Office. And so maybe there's an old laptop or something that she no longer needs. You'd simply click an X in here and remove that, and then Megan would be able to authenticate into she'd be able to license Office on another device. Now, if you accidentally click the wrong one, then Megan will just get prompted, or the user will just get prompted for a logon prompt again. Okay, so let's jump back over to Adele's portal. One of the other things you'll note here, so this is the web client, the Outlook client. Again, these are very fully featured, looks very similar to the full Outlook client, which I have here. So notice the web version, and then we'll open up the full Outlook client. There's not a whole lot that's different. There certainly are some differences in just how you work with this. But for a lot of people who have used the older versions of OWA, Outlook web application, especially from the 2003 era, 2007 era, they were rough. They worked, but they certainly weren't on par with having the full Outlook client. The web client nowadays is much smoother. So again, all of the different elements that she has access to, this user, you can just select them from the web client, and away we go. All right, so the next piece that I wanted to jump into is Exchange Online. We talked about that a little bit when we created the demo user account. So back to the admin center, I'm sorry, not the demo user account, the distribution group, and we'll see if that's ready. So if we go all the way down to the bottom here, click the Show All button. that'll expand, it'll show all the extra things, but what we're really interested in is the admin center right here. So as I mentioned, every group for Adele that showed up that she has access to, those actually have their own admin centers. And so we're interested in Exchange. So we're going to go ahead and click Exchange, and it'll pop up here. So as I mentioned before, it is web-based. Sometimes things take a little longer than the on-premise version, but that's okay. And now from here, we're going to want to take a look at the groups section. We'll wait for this to populate, and then we'll check to see if our demo 02 group, distribution group, has appeared yet. And it has. So here we can see the demo 02 group. Here's all the other distribution lists, and you can see some of these are, Microsoft 365. That's the last one that I created. This is the one that we created just earlier in the presentation. Let's go ahead and hit edit. There's some other things that we can adjust from there. The ownership, it's the mod administrator. That's who I am right now. But maybe I want to change that to somebody else. If I wanted to change that to Megan. In this instance, Megan is our office administrator, and she's currently the user who I have logged in as. Got Megan, membership. So we can add Adele, maybe Alex. Click OK. Membership approval, you can also determine whether or not it's an open group, meaning other users can join without being approved. It's a closed group, which by default, or owner approval. So other users could request to join this group, and Megan, being the owner, will get an email, and she can either allow or deny them. And then we also have options for whether anybody is able to leave this group on their own, or if only an administrator can do so. By default, this is set to open, but this is the behavior that most people are expecting. This is the traditional distribution list behavior where an administrator of some sort comes in here, sets this up, places the users in these groups, and if they need a change, they go to the administrator to change that. Delivery management. So again, here we can check the box, and this is the box I did not check. Or no, I'm sorry, I did check. If I did not check, it would be set here to only senders inside my organization. But with this group, I want everybody inside and outside my organization. And then you can limit that to just specific mail domains if you'd like. There's some options for message approval, meaning that the admin needs to approve messages before they're received by the recipients. And you can create some exceptions for this. I haven't ever seen anybody use this, unless maybe you've got like a mail group or something going on. And then here's the email address that it's using by default. We'll go ahead and save.
Clint, if I can interject for a quick
Yeah,
second.
go ahead.
So one thing that I don't think is fully exposed in the UI, or if it does, it's kind of limited, is the ability to do dynamic groups, dynamic distribution groups, that I
Yes.
find quite helpful. So if you've ever worked on administration of users and adding, removing, or moving around users, having static groups is really painful because you forget to pull somebody out of all the particular groups that they're in. So if you populate all of the information in a user, their office, their location, other identifiers like that, you can use dynamic groups to automatically populate those groups. So if you have, if you're thinking about an organization that has multiple locations, so Clint is currently in St. Cloud. Now he's going to start working in Fargo. All I have to do is change his office location, and now he doesn't get emails about when there's free lunch in St. Cloud. He gets emails for when there's free lunch in Fargo, which if you're doing statically, it's very easy to forget. So the dynamic distribution groups are really handy.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's a great point, especially about getting free food from Fargo, which makes me sad because I enjoy food. All right. Next up, so talked about groups. I want to touch on shared mailbox and ActiveSync Quarantine. So if we go into the shared section here, I have a shared mailbox created. And if we, let's do this. Let's just go through and edit it. So as we edit this, general is there by default. And what most people are interested in is the mailbox delegation. So I've delegated this shared mailbox to Megan. In this case, this is a contact us, and I may have multiple people accessing this mailbox. So in this instance, I just have Megan, but maybe if Megan's not available, Wilbur is her backup, or maybe they both manage this account. Um, so by doing so I just added Wilbur, and if I hit save, what'll happen on Wilbur's Outlook account eventually, so now I'm looking at Megan's Outlook. Here on the side, it'll pop up as an additional mailbox. And currently, Megan also has the ability to send on behalf of the Contact Us folder, the Contact Us mailbox. So we can send this to whomever, and then we can also change our options to see who it's coming from. And you can change your other email address. You can include the contact us, should pop up as a drop down here, or if I'm wanting to respond to a email here as a contact us, I can certainly do so. I've added this not too long ago, so it may not be fully replicated yet, as it's still showing Megan's account, as I mentioned before, with Office 365. You have to give it some time for things to replicate, but it's helpful. One of the other things to note with shared accounts is when you convert somebody to a shared account mailbox, that mailbox no longer requires a license, and that's a key piece of keeping your costs down. So in a scenario where we're going to go back to the admin center, and let's say that, we'll go ahead and clear our filter. Let's say Alan is leaving the organization. So in that situation, the first thing I'm going to want to do is I want to block his user, right? So just like we did before, we're going to do a block sign in. So he's already left the organization. And then we're going to jump over into, great, okay, so Alan's been blocked. We'll close that out. We're going to go over into the Exchange console, and we're going to go to the mailboxes. So from the default, it would be the admin center, recipients, mailboxes. We're going to look for Alan, who's right here. And simply all I need to do is convert him to a shared mailbox. Are you sure you want to convert him? Yes. All of his content will still be available. So if you're looking to replace Alan's position with somebody else, a lot of times what I'll see is either the HR manager or the direct manager, the HR person, or depending on the role, that next person who's hired, we would then go into the shared group here. Alan will show up here. We'll go ahead and edit. And, mailbox delegation. We can add, maybe Megan is going to be the HR person or the hiring manager, or either way, Megan needs to have access to Alan's account. So we go ahead and hit save. And so just like the contact us, now Alan's account is no longer needing a business premium license. Now it still has it because we haven't taken it away. But the last part of this process would be removing the license from Alan, like so. Hit save, and that's it. Alan has been fully decommissioned from the environment. He'll still hang around here until we're ready to delete his account completely. But now his mailbox is, for our purposes, archived and available for other people to manage. It still will receive email. There's some things we can do to set up a auto response if you'd like, and you can still send on behalf of Alan's email account until that transition has completed. Next item I wanted to touch on is the ActiveSync Quarantine. So for a handful of users or clients that we work with, they don't want users by default being able to access their email on their phones or mobile devices, etc. And there's certainly good reasoning for that. Microsoft does allow you to block that completely, but one of the features that I find interesting is the mobile device access, which allows you to set up a quarantine. So in this instance here, we'll go ahead, we click the mobile device access from the Exchange Admin Center. We'll choose Edit. Quarantine, I've already changed this, but by default, it's set to allow access, meaning that everybody can access the environment no matter where they are. I've gone ahead and clicked quarantine, and you can see here that my user Megan has been selected as kind of the admin for receiving notifications. So if somebody did try to connect with their phone, Megan would receive an email that says, hey, so-and-so, this user is trying to connect with this device. Please log into the admin console and approve it. So then right here under quarantine devices, I would see the device, I could check it and I could approve it. And then that user would be able to access from their phone. Or maybe I don't want anybody. I still recommend setting up quarantine because then you can at least see who's trying to. And then you can have a conversation with that user. Why are you trying to access through your phone, through your tablet, etc. The last piece of Exchange Online I wanted to touch on was message encryption. So again, this is a business premium feature. Message encryption, go ahead and we'll click new mail. I'll send it to Adele. Secrets, okay, here we go. And just like in any other email that you'd send out, you still have your basic high, medium, low, etc. But then there's also other options that are available where you can encrypt an email. Now, Megan, the user who I'm sending this from, and Adele, they're a part of the same organization. So when I send this, it's just going to open automatically. But you will be able to tell. So for Adele, we'll jump into her mail, which is right here. And this will eventually pop up, and we'll be able to tell that the email when it was received is encrypted, undeliverable, of course. Anyway, yeah, trust me on that one. It does say encrypted. I don't know why that didn't go through, but it should have popped up. If you're sending to an external entity, there's some pieces that we can configure of how they authenticate. But again, just having that email encryption as a staple of your security strategy is important for a lot of organizations. All right, moving on from Exchange, I wanted to jump into the world of Teams. So there's a lot of pieces to Microsoft Teams. We're just going to touch on a few things here and there. But with each of these, let's go back to the Admin Center. So again, as I mentioned before, Teams has its own Admin Center, or rather each of these elements have their own Admin Center. And, oh, not so much. All right, so the Teams Admin Center pops up here. Let's, I'm gonna just go ahead and show you Teams, and then we'll try to get into the Admin Center later. So here's the full client for Teams, if you've used that or if you're familiar with it. One of the basic, or probably the most basic element of Teams is using the chat feature. So we go ahead and click chat and new, and we're gonna chat with Adele. Maybe, hey there, away we go. So that's very basic. But we can also turn things up a little bit by adding a file or two. So Adele's typing back, hello. There's a joke in there somewhere. I don't get it. Anyway, I'm going to open up my OneDrive. Here I've got some presentations that I maybe want to, or an RD expense report that I want to work on with Adele. So if I open them directly from OneDrive, they'll pop up just as I expect them to, or I can also choose to work on them directly with Adele by sharing the file, drop the file in here. Here's my RD expense report. Hit enter. And now both of us can work on this together. Also, if you go into the files section here, you can see all the files that you have shared with that person. So if I go into that, Mike is also connected to Adele. If he wants to open the PowerPoint presentation on his side, I'll get a little prompt that says somebody else is working on this at the same time. And so now, as a part of our conversation, either through the chat message, or if we have a phone call, you can work on these files together. Go ahead and hit close. So that's a very basic method of communicating in Teams. If you want to amplify that, I mean, it is called Teams, not just a single person. Oh, actually, we could turn this into a team chat by adding additional users to it. Or if I just wanted to create a new chat, and maybe I want Adele, and I want, well, Alan's probably a bad example since we terminated him. Of course, he's the IT admin. The marketing assistant, and Alex. And now we have a three-way chat going on with myself, Adele, and Alex. But let's go into the Teams section here where we can create channels. So this is an example of a channel that we've already created. Here's some channels that have been populated. And channels are where a number of users come together and they work on information together. You can see by default, there's animated GIFs in there. A lot of people enjoy them because it helps you express yourself better, though we do have a handful of clients that don't want anything to do with them because they're not professional and they can be disabled, turned off. You have the emoticons here, emojis, you can like things and they show up in the corner with a counter. A lot of times these will be used for ongoing projects or collaboration. So the same concept here with the files, all the files that the team is working on. And there's some other elements that you can add here. We're not going to get into them, but you can add, these are different tabs, and there's a lot of different features that you can add, you know, not even just limited to Microsoft, but there's third-party products. There's a whole store of products out here that you can add to share with your team. So maybe if you have Evernote and you want to share an Evernote page with your team, you can add that in there, and then you of course would have to connect through Evernote. So you sign into Evernote, and then you can post that you've added this back to the team. Tell them, hey guys, I'm starting to save all my info in Evernote, and then it would show up as a tab right up here. As an admin, though, I can go into any one of these that I'm an owner of, and I can manage the team. I can add channels to the team, and I can also manage my members. So if I have any members in here, it looks like I've got 17 on this one, and I can choose to remove certain people if I don't want them in there, or I can add additional people if they're not currently in there. So I don't know if I saw Alex in there or not, but I can go ahead and add Alex. He'll get an email that says that he already exists. He'll get an email that says, hey, you've been invited to this project, and or rather this new channel, and away we go. He clicks the link and he's able to access these things. And creating a new channel is pretty straightforward also. Just down at the bottom here, we can join or create a team. We'll create a team from an existing group if you'd like, or from scratch. You can make it private, meaning that people need permission to join. Public, anyone can join, or everyone in your organization automatically is joined. So we're going to make this public. Demo 02, real creative at the moment. Go ahead and hit create, and away we go. Nice work. So one of the security pieces, so then it wants me to add some members. One of the security pieces to keep aware of, by default, Microsoft allows guest users, and if you typed in Bill Microsoft at Microsoft.com, these are considered external users, so they don't exist in your organization. Currently, I have this locked down, so they have to be a part of my organization, but I can enable the ability to allow guest users in. And there's good reason for it. Where you may be working with an external entity, great. So they're locked down to just the channel that you've granted them access to. However, the thing to keep in mind, so just like email, if you have a lot of information, so like this, legal and compliance, granted it's named legal and compliance, so that probably would be a good indicator. You shouldn't have sensitive information in there, or you shouldn't have external users that aren't, maybe your legal team or something like that. But Let's say this information had been in here for months, and then all of a sudden, an additional user, and you had an external user in there. And then all of a sudden, a new user to your organization jumps in there and starts sharing some sensitive information, not aware that there's some external users there. Some people, throw their hands up immediately and go, "Oh, secure, that should never happen." Well, my response to that is, what's the difference with email? Email can be the same thing, where somebody gets in on the wrong thread or accidentally, and now you've shared the history of what you had with that individual. So really, it comes down to training, making sure that your users are aware. If your organization allows guest users, just make sure that they're aware that that could be a risk that's available there. All right, let's see, working in documents, we talked to, Teams conferencing. The last thing I'll talk on for Teams. And again, any questions that are popping up, feel free to throw them in the question box there. We'll get to them in just a moment here. So for Teams, once you install the Teams client itself, which is right here, you can create Teams meetings right through the calendar. I typically don't recommend this. You can do a Teams meeting or a Meet Now. We'll fill this in and hit save. Most people are very familiar already with using Outlook, and so they like to use the Outlook plugin. This is not available immediately in Outlook until you've installed Teams, and then a lot of times you have to reinstall, or sorry, just close and reopen Outlook, sometimes a couple times in order for it to fire off. But so here, maybe I've got a meeting later today. Teams example. I'm going to go hit the Teams meeting button. It automatically populates this for me. You can see it's a Teams meeting, and then I'll send this again to Adele. Go ahead and hit send. Adele simply just needs to click that link. I simply just need to click that link. It'll launch Teams, it'll open up, and it'll be ready so I can join that meeting. Well, I don't even have a device in here to talk, but it'll join that meeting with Adele and anybody else who is a part of that conversation. So in this example where I didn't have a microphone, or maybe something's happening with my microphone, I can check the chat box, and then we can have this conversation here, which usually goes a lot like, can you hear me? And then away we go. Okay, so that's where we're going to pause on Teams. And I wanted to move on to the next part of our presentation, which is OneDrive. And this will be a fairly quick section. So OneDrive, which showed just a little bit of. So down in the corner here, by default, Microsoft has their OneDrive product installed on Windows 10. You may not be using it today, but it's a very helpful tool. Once you've installed it, OneDrive shows up in your just File Explorer right here. So again, you can see this is pre-populated. And if you've ever used OneDrive Personal or Dropbox or anything like that, it works very similar. There's a few additional features with OneDrive for Business. One of the big things, though, that I like to point out, which not everybody's aware of or doesn't think about, is by default, you can share. So here I'm able to share this file, this folder, which has private information in it. And by default, it's set to anyone with the link. Actually, it's set to people in Contoso with the link, which is my fake company. But that's because I've changed it, and I'll show you where to change that. But it's set to anyone with the link. So I can set specific people. I can choose whether or not they're allowed to edit, and then I can enter the specific people in here, even if it's a external. So clint.lentner@netcenter.net. So I'm an external person, and they're sending this to me. If I hit send, this will send me a copy of this, and away it goes. But the key piece that I wanted to point out is when they send this, it's sending a link to this email. It's not sending a secure link, it's just sending a link. So if I forward that on to someone else, then they're also going to have access to that private folder, and that could cause problems. Again, security, let's freak out and shut it all off. To a point, let's make sure that it's restricted enough so our users are safe, but also that they have training. people you may specify can view, instead of having that, or instead of anyone with the link, you can set it to either people with existing access or people within the organization. What I recommend is, instead of turning off turning off OneDrive completely, when you start out with 365, just enable this so they can only share that content within people or with other users in your organization. We hit apply, you get a link, and away it goes. As I mentioned before, so this is the on-prem, or the installed version of OneDrive. If I go back to Adele, as I mentioned here, all of her features are here in the portal. Adele, who may not have a workstation necessarily that she has or wants to install the local client on, maybe it's her personal workstation, something like that, she can still log into the portal and hear all the files that she can work from. Last thing on OneDrive that I'll point out, so if we go back to the admin console, let's go back to Alan as an example. Maybe in this case, I have a user who's leaving the organization, and I want to gain access to their OneDrive portal before they leave. So I don't want to yet reset their password, something like that. There just may be a scenario where you don't want to reset their password and log in to access their OneDrive. As an admin, you can gain access to their files. So again, I clicked on his link, the OneDrive, create a link to share files. It'll load an access link. There we go. I can click on it. And now as an admin, I've logged into Alan's OneDrive. Any of the information that he has here, I can simply go ahead and highlight, and I can choose download, and I can archive that somewhere else if I would like, that's not necessarily stored in his user account. All right, and last piece here, well, two last pieces, and then I get to some Q&A really quick, is SharePoint. The only piece I wanted to touch on with SharePoint is SharePoint kind of fits into the background of all of these things. SharePoint also has its own admin console, which we're not going to get into, but SharePoint does have an interesting feature that is integrated right into Teams. And so when you're sharing a file with somebody, or if you're in, so here's my conversation with Adele and Alex. Let's go to a Teams channel, and let's go to this one here, the Digital Assets Web. I go to Files. This Digital Assets Web is really in SharePoint. So if I open in SharePoint, those of you who are familiar with SharePoint, which we won't be diving too deep into, we've got Megan's account and of course her password. Give me just a second here. We'll get logged in as Megan. There we go. Yes, I'd like to stay signed in. And now here's the SharePoint version of all the content that we saved and have been working on within Teams. But you get this interesting button called Sync. And this is very helpful. Teams also has that sync button. When you click it, what it does is it syncs that content into your OneDrive account, which also maps it right here on Windows Explorer, which makes it super helpful. I use this on a regular basis where I have a Teams for all the solutions architects. We get together, talk about conversations, and there might be files and stuff that are in there. Well, now I can just work right out of here because I'm very familiar with Windows Explorer. Instead of having to bounce in and out of Teams, you can do so right from your File Explorer window. All right, the last thing, which I promised you before, and we'll see if it works with the demo environment. Of course, we tried this all yesterday and they were working, and Murphy's Law and all of that. So we have a OneDrive admin center. We're gonna go ahead and click on that. Hey, it's coming up, great. So if we choose sharing, remember I had talked about you can set the defaults. So here is where you can set your default. By default, it's set to anyone with the link. I don't want that. I want internal only people by default, so my users don't accidentally click sending anybody a link. And here I can also reduce my sharing permissions. I want only people in my organization to be able to share their content with other people in the organization, or potentially I have authorized existing users, or new and existing external users, or then there's anyone. I do recommend at minimum this, which is new and existing external users, meaning that the user still has to sign in and authenticate for whoever you're sharing that information with. And then under this little drop down here, you can allow or block sharing with people on specific domains. External users must accept sharing invites using the same account the invites were sent to. This is important, so they don't just open it with their Gmail account. And then let external users share items they don't own. Also important to not have this checked. My recommendation for that. All right. Oh, we did talk about Teams. Let's see if it'll open now. Nope. All right. So Teams is being grabby, probably because I'm using a incognito window. I was going to show you in there where you can enable or disable guest access. But we're going to pause there. We're at 11:50 and wanted to take some time for any Q&A. So if we have some questions.
Clint and Mike, very well done. A couple questions here. I'll work through them, I think, in terms of quick answers to slow answers. First one, is the encryption service built in, or is there an additional cost for it?
Yeah, so the encryption service depends on what version or what licensing you're using. For sure, the E3 and the business premium editions have that.
Thank you. With Office 365 for Outlook, do you have recommendations on creating backups of data?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that could be a presentation all on its own. So by default, you do have some backup protection, but not what you'd consider traditional backup. So if you had some crypto malware or something get in there and encrypt all of your documents, Microsoft offers some protection on that with the business version of OneDrive. However, we do recommend engaging a partner like us, or if you have a third party that specifically does 365 backups, which will take a copy of your content and store it somewhere else, which again would keep you more in line with the 3-2-1 practice of good backups.
Clint, we're in the business track here. So the question is, from a business perspective, can you describe the differences between Microsoft 365 and Office 365, or are they interchangeable terms?
Yeah, great question. So not too long ago, Microsoft decided to break up their Office 365 and start throwing Microsoft 365 in there. They will tell you that Microsoft 365 is anything that's a part of their Microsoft environment, including Office 365. So it's a portion of it. If you're using Dynamics 365, if you're using Windows Virtual Desktop, any of those elements, they now consider a part of Microsoft 365.
Great. Business track again. Is there a clear cut business case for using Microsoft or Office 365 cloud-related Microsoft products versus having them on-premises loading on localized servers?
Yeah, great question. What I've seen, if you just used Office 365 for email, it can be expensive, where your basic user is $5 a user, and that's per month. So that just keeps going, right? The more expensive item or licenses like Business Premium, which we showed a lot of features of today, that runs up to $20 a month. So that can really add up to your cost. However, and this is Microsoft's intent, they don't want you just using one piece of it. They want you using a lot of different pieces. So if you currently don't have a MDM solution, a mobile device management solution, and you currently don't have email encryption, and you currently don't, well, if you were to go and do all those things in addition to your email service, that's certainly going to add up to at least 20 a user per month. And so when you kind of go all in, that's where your biggest benefit comes from. In addition to, you've paid so much per license for your Office license that's on premise. Well, with Microsoft 365, now you get that as a part of the subscription. So you don't have these large capital purchases that come around every, depending on how long you wait to upgrade Office. You've just been paying that out as a part of an operational expense.
Excellent.
2 points to go along with that. If you're going to do installed Exchange on-prem, that the iteration, the amount of new features that will come out with that version is going to be limited. Microsoft's already said it's going to innovate more in the cloud services. So, just the fact that the interface changes and there's more bits and pieces in there, that's always going to be in the cloud first. And since they're only doing quarterly updates for Exchange, that's about as soon as you can expect any new features to show up in there. So especially when you're talking about security things like multi-factor authentication, which you wouldn't be able to get on regular Exchange on-prem, and it's included in the 365 packages. And the second part, at Microsoft Ignite this year, they talked about all future versions of Exchange, whenever the Exchange 2021 or 22 or whatever version they're going to call it, the on-prem versions of that will be subscription-based. So if you take aside the Office licensing, Microsoft is going to a subscription model for these products. If you have Exchange 2016 right now, you'll have a period of time until it's not a subscription, but as soon as you upgrade to the next version, you're in that model anyway. So there's some considerations there. Do you jump on at Exchange 2019 to have the pay for and run it out for support, or do you want the subscription based? So there's some more considerations coming down the turnpike for that.
Thanks, Mike. Related question, hopefully it's not mutually exclusive here, but the question is Microsoft Office that we currently use becoming obsolete, or is it obsolete? Second part of the question is, are we going to be forced to switch to Microsoft 365, or can we run it out for the duration?
I'd say it depends on what version you have. So I'm assuming that you currently have an on-prem version that you've purchased traditional, either through box provider or open license. There's nothing wrong with running that out as long as it's still getting security updates. So if you're calling about and asking me, can I continue to run 2003? I'm going to tell you no. Can you functionally? Absolutely, but they're no longer getting security updates. 2007, same story there. If you've just purchased the 2016 version for your on-prem environment, feel free to continue to use that. It still connects in with 365 elements. OneDrive is still an option in there. The intent, though, as Mike mentioned, is Microsoft wants everything to go to a subscription-based model. So, as he mentioned with the news from Intune, Ignite, it would not surprise me that their next release they'll be notifying everybody that it's a subscription-only option.
We're getting close to being up against the window here. There was a group of questions that came in. I think there was 4 in one batch. The first one that was sent in, that's the one I'm looking for, guys. I want to pick that one apart for Mike and Clint. While we're looking for that one, here's another quick one here. Oops, no, I just lost it. Yes, the question is, will the presentation be sent out to me and available for view at a later date? The answer to the question, I'll take this one. Dumb guy, right? 2 smart guys on the phone, dumb guy, I'll take this one. All of the presentations you hear today during Envision 2020 I'll be available to you, and they'll be distributed at your request at a later date. So yes, the answer is the question. Thank you. So next question is, when you convert someone to a shared mailbox, how do you also protect their OneDrive files from deletion before you remove the license? I think that makes sense, and there's 3 parts to it, so I'll let you guys tackle that one first, please.
Yeah, so I kind of walked through that a little backwards during my demo with Alan, the IT manager that we decommissioned. Normally, I would grab his OneDrive data before I would remove his license, and there's a tombstone timing on the data that's there. So even if I believe it's 30 days. So even if you remove the license, as long as you put the license back into place. before that 30 days is up, you'll still have access to their information. But good point though, and I do recommend as you're removing users, make sure that you at least look to see if they have stored anything in OneDrive.
Second part, how long do these stay around? I think you just answered, correct?
Yep.
30 days, yep. Can they easily be moved to a new user or saved to a general SharePoint site?
Yep, so if you're like in Alan's example there, you download them and a new user comes in, so his replacement, you could certainly upload them to a centralized SharePoint site. Because in 365 we don't necessarily have a file server, or traditional file server, that's what SharePoint becomes. So I would create a repository in SharePoint and put appropriate permissions around it and store their stuff there.
So the last question is, and I believe the answer is yes, is it set up with a policy somewhere or is it done manually?
The permissions are something that you would put in place initially manually. Yep. I'm not entirely certain on all the elements that go into the policy side on SharePoint, but I think there are some dynamic things you can do with policies also.
Excellent. Very well done, fellows. That's the end of the questions. That's the best volume of questions that we've seen. Certainly a relevant topic. And we appreciate your time. Clint, make sure you get some water. Very well done.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys. Again, like Brad had said, if you have any other questions, feel free to continue to add them, and we'll either, if we didn't get to your question today, we'll reach out later and make sure we get it answered for you.
Mike Pagan, there's one more question that just came in. It says, what does it take to get Mike Pagan to smile? Tough one. All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Love how his face is frozen in a frown.
Can't tell if he's frozen or if he's stone-faced killer for some other reason. All right, guys, thank you. Well done.